Marcus Hale had never believed in legends. As a historian, he relied on facts, on evidence etched in the pages of old books or uncovered beneath layers of earth. Yet here he was, standing at the edge of Greywood Forest, staring into a sea of twisted branches and thick choking fog. The village of Elders Hollow lay just beyond the tree line, a small, somber cluster of stone cottages wrapped in the shadow of the ancient woods. For centuries, whispers had clung to the place, stories of people vanishing without trace, strange lights flickering in the darkness, and melodies drifting through the night air like lost souls crying for release. Most dismissed these tales as superstition, the desperate fabrications of isolated folk. But Marcus had found something different. A worn journal at a dusty market stall, its pages filled with cryptic entries penned by a man named Elias Crow, a local who vanished decades ago. According to the journal, the Hollow's curse was real. It spoke of a pact sealed long ago between the villagers and a force lurking beneath the forest's heart. A balance maintained by sacrifice and vigilance. Marcus adjusted his coat against the chill and stepped forward, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot breaking the silence. The air smelled damp and old, as if the forest exhaled centuries of secrets with every breath. He pulled the journal from his bag, flipping to a page marked with a faded symbol, an intricate knot woven between branches and roots. "The Hollow remembers," he murmured. As he ventured deeper, the light dimmed beneath the dense canopy. Shapes shifted at the edge of his vision, shadows that flickered like flames but vanished when he turned. Then, faintly at first, came the melody, a haunting tune, wordless yet filled with longing. It floated through the trees, wrapping around Marcus like a ghostly hand, drawing him forward. His heart pounded, a mix of fear and fascination. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity pushed him onward. The journal's words echoed in his mind. "To find the truth, you must first listen." Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way and Marcus tumbled into darkness. When he awoke, he was in a cavern glowing with strange bioluminescent fungi, their light pulsing softly. The air was thick with the scent of earth and something older, something alive. In the center stood a stone pedestal, carved with the same knot symbol. Marcus approached cautiously, fingers tracing the cool surface. The moment he touched it, the cavern trembled and whispers filled the air, voices ancient and layered with sorrow. A figure emerged from the shadows. A woman cloaked in gray, eyes shining with unspoken knowledge. "Welcome, seeker," she said. "You have crossed the threshold." Marcus swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his journey settle upon him. He was no longer just a man chasing stories. He had stepped into the very heart of the Hollow's mystery. And the whispers were waiting. The woman's voice echoed softly through the cavern, mingling with the murmurs of unseen spirits. Marcus blinked, trying to steady his racing heart. "I am Alara," she said, stepping fully into the dim light. Her gray cloak shimmered like mist, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. "I have watched over this place for longer than memory. You have been brought here for a purpose." Marcus swallowed, struggling to make sense of everything. "Why me? Why now?" Alara's gaze pierced him. "Because the balance is breaking. The Hollow remembers its old wounds, and soon the shadows will rise again. You carry the key to what was lost." She gestured toward the pedestal. "This knot you touched is the seal, the symbol of the pact between the villagers and the forces beneath the forest. For generations the pact held the darkness at bay. But something has shifted." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "What shifted?" "The bloodline of the original pact bearers has weakened," Alara explained. "The ritual that sustained the balance requires a living connection, a guardian to renew the bond. Without it, the forest shadows grow restless." A sudden chill ran through the cavern as faint whispers swelled into a chorus of voices, sorrowful, pleading, and sometimes angry. Marcus felt them brush past like cold wind. "Who are they?" he asked. "The lost souls," Alara said. "Trapped between worlds, bound by the old curse. They cannot find rest until the pact is restored." Marcus's mind raced. The journal, the melody, the shadows, all threads woven into this dark tapestry. Alara stepped closer. "You must decide, Marcus. To leave is to let the curse consume the Hollow and its people. To stay is to become the new guardian, but the cost is great." The weight of her words pressed down on him, heavier than the stone beneath his fingers. "Tell me what I must do," he said finally. Alara nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "First you must learn the history. The truth lies hidden in the ruins scattered throughout the forest, places forgotten by time but alive with memory." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, worn map, its edges frayed. "This will guide you. Find the shrines and unlock their secrets. Only then can the ritual begin." Marcus took the map, feeling its texture, the faded ink almost pulsing with life. As he looked up, the cavern began to fade, the glow dimming like a dying ember. "Remember," Ilara's voice lingered, "the hollow watches all, and the shadows hunger." Marcus found himself back at the forest's edge, the night thick around him. The melody had ceased, but the sense of being watched remained. He folded the map carefully, steeling himself for the path ahead. The map burned faintly in Marcus's pocket as he ventured deeper into Greywood Forest, guided by Ilara's cryptic directions. The moon hung low, casting pale light through the thick branches, turning the world into shifting shadows. Every step seemed to echo louder, as if the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting. The weight of the pact pressed on him, the knowledge that failure would mean doom for Elders Hollow and perhaps beyond. His boots crunched over dry leaves, broken twigs snapping underfoot. Ahead, the faint outline of an ancient stone altar appeared, half swallowed by moss and ivy. The symbols carved into the surface matched those in the journal, the same knot of roots and branches. Marcus knelt, tracing the worn patterns with trembling fingers. The air around him thickened and whispers swirled like mist, filling his ears with ghostly voices. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath him and a chilling gust swept through the clearing. Shadows flickered along the edges of his vision, shapes forming then dissolving into the night. He stood abruptly, heart pounding. "Who's there?" he called, voice cracking. No answer came, only the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Marcus reached into his pack and pulled out one of the twin lanterns Ilara had given him. The flame inside flickered blue, casting a calm, steady glow. As he raised the lantern, the knot symbol began to shimmer faintly, the runes glowing with an eerie light. A sudden flash blinded him, and when his vision cleared, a figure stood before him, tall, cloaked in shadows, eyes gleaming with unnatural light. "Why do you disturb the hollow?" The figure's voice was low, almost a growl. Marcus swallowed, gripping the lantern tighter. "I seek to restore the pact, to save the village from the curse." The figure stepped closer, and Marcus saw the flicker of ancient pain in those eyes. "Many have tried and failed. The hollow is not so easily tamed." With a swift motion, the figure vanished into the forest, leaving Marcus alone with the glowing altar and the creeping shadows. Breathing deeply, Marcus whispered, "I won't fail." The night deepened and the forest whispered back, ancient secrets stirring, watching his every move. The shrine's light faded slowly, leaving behind a faint warmth that pulsed through Marcus's fingertips. Something had changed. He could feel it deep in his chest. A tremor, a resonance, as if the altar had awakened something inside him. He turned back to the map, now subtly glowing beneath the lantern's light. A new symbol had appeared, a crescent of thorns surrounding a drop of red. It pulsed faintly near the base of the forest's southern edge. Another shrine. Without hesitation, Marcus followed the winding path marked by ancient trees whose bark twisted in unnatural patterns. The deeper he traveled, the more the forest seemed to shift around him. Time blurred and familiar paths looped into themselves. The hollow resisted him, testing, probing. After hours of disorientation and silence, he stumbled into a grove unlike any he'd seen. It was unnaturally quiet. Not a single leaf rustled. In the center stood a cracked stone well, choked with vines and thick, dark moss. The air smelled of rust and decay. As he approached, the whispers returned, but they were different now. Not mournful. Urgent. He broke the vow. Blood opened the gate. Blood must seal it again. Marcus leaned over the edge of the well. At the bottom, something shimmered. Not water but a dark, slick substance that glistened like oil. A memory from the journal rose in his mind. The second shrine remembers the betrayal. The blood of the vow-bearer still stains the stones. A gust of wind struck him suddenly, and the vines peeled away from the well's rim. Carved into the stone was a relief. A figure kneeling, a knife in one hand, their other arm outstretched and bleeding into the earth. Marcus recoiled. It wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. Ilara had told him the ritual would demand a price. Perhaps not death, not yet, but sacrifice. Commitment. Suffering. With shaking hands he drew a small dagger from his belt. The blade was ceremonial, gifted to him in Prague during a forgotten academic exchange. Never used. Till now. He took a breath, steadied himself and sliced a shallow cut across his palm. The pain was sharp and immediate. He extended his bleeding hand over the well, letting droplets fall into the blackness. The change was instant. The vines snapped upright as though electrified, writhing and curling into the air. The surface of the black liquid rippled, then hissed and shimmered, turning silver. And from the well a voice emerged. You awaken what slumbers. You feed the bond. Marcus stared, heart hammering. Who are you? I am the memory of the pact. The last guardian who fell. I am what remains. Images flooded his mind, a past long buried. A man standing where Marcus now stood. Alara at his side. Fire. Screams. A seal broken. The voice continued, fainter now. 3 shrines must open. Then the gate of roots. Only then can the hollow be bound again. Or consumed. The silver glow receded. The well fell silent once more. Marcus collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. He understood now, he was walking the path of the first guardian, the one who had failed. The hollow hadn't simply been cursed. It had been betrayed. And someone, or something, was waiting for another chance to finish what had been started long ago. The forest had changed. Not in the way of light or shape. No, those still bent and turned in that unsettling way the hollow did. But in feeling. Since the well, since the offering of blood, Marcus felt watched. Not merely observed, but anticipated, as if something in the woods knew where he would step next. The map had shifted again. A third symbol now glowed in the northeast. A jagged crown encircling a hollow circle like an empty eye. He folded it carefully, tucking it into his jacket and pressed forward. The trees grew thinner the farther he walked and the air lighter, colder. He found himself climbing gradually and soon the moss-covered ground gave way to rocks and roots. Ahead, the land sloped upward toward a dark ridge where birds refused to perch and no leaves grew. Near the summit he saw it. An old church, or what was left of one. Crumbling stone walls clawed toward the sky, and stained glass windows hung like shattered memories in the hollow eyes of the building. The forest had not claimed it, and that in itself was a warning. Marcus hesitated at the edge of the clearing. Then a voice behind him. You're not the first to come here. He turned sharply. A man stood at the edge of the tree line. Dressed in black as if sewn from the forest's own shadows. But he had no face. Where his features should have been, there was only smooth, featureless skin, like clay untouched by a sculptor. Yet Marcus felt those eyes even though they were not there. Who are you? Marcus asked, voice tighter than he intended. The man cocked his head. A question better asked of yourself. You wear the blood of the pact. Do you even know what that means? Marcus held his ground. I know enough. The faceless man chuckled, an unnatural dry rasp that made the leaves tremble. You know fragments. Scribbles in a madman's journal. The truth is older than pages. Older than Alara. Older than this world's memory. He took a step closer. Marcus instinctively reached for the lantern, but the flame inside flickered erratically. Why are you following me? I walk beside all who open the shrines, the man said. I am the debt unpaid. And with that he simply turned and vanished into the trees. Marcus stood frozen. Not a single twig had snapped beneath the figure's feet. He turned toward the ruin. The church door was gone. Only the arched frame remained. Inside, dust lay heavy on the cracked stone floor, and vines had begun to push through the windows, yet none entered beyond a certain point. A boundary perhaps. In the center of the church stood a dais, flat stone, circular, with a recess in its heart like a bowl. He approached slowly. The whispers returned, but this time they sang. Low, harmonic tones. A hymn without words. He drew the dagger again. His palm still ached from the first wound, so he made another, smaller cut just above his wrist and let the blood fall into the hollow of the stone. The singing ceased. The chamber fell deathly silent. Then light. Not from the lantern but from within the dais. The blood glowed, then evaporated, leaving behind a symbol etched in golden fire, the eye within the crown. A rumbling followed. Stones shook. Dust fell from above. And then, the vision came. Not like before, not a whisper, not a voice. This was overwhelming, a presence. He was no longer in the church. He stood in a field under stars he didn't recognize. Before him towered a tree the size of a mountain, bark black as pitch, leaves made of glass that hummed as they moved. Beneath its roots coiled something massive. Sleeping. Breathing. The hollow. The voice came not from outside but from within his bones. The roots remember. The ices. The pact was not broken, it was consumed. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision vanished. He was back in the church. Alone. But the eye still glowed. And somewhere in the trees beyond, the man with no face was waiting. The church behind him, Marcus descended the ridge in silence. The night was growing colder, though no breeze stirred the trees. His breath fogged before him as if the air itself had grown suspicious of his presence. 3 shrines had answered. 3 memories awakened. And yet there was still no clear path forward. Only questions tangled like the forest around him. He paused at the edge of a black pond whose surface mirrored not the moon above, but some deeper sky below. The reflection was too perfect. Too still. When he leaned over it he saw not just his face, but 2 reflections. One was his. The other stood behind him, tall and featureless. Marcus turned sharply. No one was there. He didn't speak. Didn't call out. Just kept walking. It was nearly dawn when the trees opened and he found himself in a familiar clearing. The one from his childhood. He remembered playing here once, long ago, when the village still held harvest festivals and elders danced with painted masks. In the center stood the final marker on his map. Not a shrine. Not a well. But a tree. Unlike the rest of Greywood's crooked giants, this tree stood straight and proud, bark pale as bone, branches heavy with no leaves, only hanging talismans made of stone and string. Hundreds of them. Some freshly carved. Some ancient and cracked with age. This was the gate of roots. He stepped forward and the talismans began to chime, soft disharmonic tones like teeth clicking in rhythm. The ground pulsed beneath his feet. A circle of roots around the tree shifted, revealing a spiral staircase descending into the earth. From below rose a scent of damp stone and old secrets. Marcus hesitated, then lit his lantern. The blue flame steadied. And he began to descend. The steps went deeper than they should have, far beyond the depth of any ordinary hill. Walls of entwined root and stone formed the tunnel, and along them glowed faint carvings, scenes of the village, the forest, and something beneath both. Something vast. Big. Bound. Finally, the staircase ended in a chamber unlike the others. It was not natural, it was a vault. Circular, domed, and silent. 7 pillars stood around the edge, each carved with a name in a language Marcus did not know but understood. These were the original pact bearers. The ones who had sealed the hollow. In the center of the chamber was a dais, similar to those at the shrines, but this one bore no bowl. No seal. Only a single ancient object. A mask. It was carved of some dark wood, smooth and featureless, save for a wide hollow where the eyes should be. It pulsed faintly with red light. Marcus approached. He didn't touch it. But the air thickened. And Alara's voice echoed from nowhere. This is the choice, Marcus. Not of blood but of identity. To restore the pact is to become it. He clenched his fists. What does that mean? You must give up your name. Your past. Your face. The hollow does not take lightly its bargains. Memories flashed. His childhood, his parents' warnings, the old stories whispered at the tavern fires. The guardian, faceless and eternal, watching the edge of the forest. A myth, they said. But myths were truths worn thin by time. Marcus stepped back. I'm not ready. From behind him came the scraping sound of footsteps on stone. He turned. The man with no face stood at the bottom of the stairs. No one ever is, he said. This time his voice was clearer. More human. And his head tilted not like a predator's, but like someone who once knew grief. I wore the mask, he said. I was the last guardian. Marcus's breath caught. You broke the pact. No, the man said softly. I tried to protect it. But I loved someone. And that love made me weak. I chose her over the hollow. And the roots remembered. He stepped closer. If you put on the mask, Marcus, there is no going back. No face. No voice. You will be memory. You will be watcher, not man. Marcus looked down at the mask. Its surface shimmered with the red glow of buried pain. And he whispered, "Then why are you still here?" The man hesitated. To see if someone would choose better. And then he was gone. Marcus stood alone, the mask between his hands and the weight of every broken promise pressing down on his shoulders. Somewhere above, dawn broke. But in the hollow there was no light. Not yet. Marcus stood still for what felt like hours. The mask waited. Its silence was louder than thunder. It demanded nothing, yet it offered everything: answers, power, clarity. But at a price that Marcus wasn't sure he could name. He thought of his father, long buried in the cemetery behind the chapel on the hill. Of his mother, whose eyes never quite returned from the war. Of Alara, who had vanished into the hollow years ago, only to reappear as something changed, distant, and yet more real than anyone else he'd ever known. He thought of Elder's Hollow itself. The village that had whispered of gods in the roots, of bargains in the wind. The people who lived under superstition but never dared confront the thing those stories circled around. And he thought of the man with no face, who had loved once and lost everything. Was that what awaited him? He didn't know. But he was already too far in to walk away. His hands moved on their own. He lifted the mask. The moment his fingers touched the wood, a cold rippled through him like ice in his marrow. The mask was heavy. Not with weight, with memory. With burden. His vision blurred. He staggered. Then he put it on. The world fell away. There was no up. No down. No air, no ground. Only roots. Endless, spiraling, entwining roots stretching through shadow. Through thought. Voices clamored at him, a chorus of every pact bearer before him. Remember. Guard. Choose. Forget. And beneath them something larger. Something deeper. The hollow itself. It spoke not in words but in sensation. A current running through everything, a cold river of ancient purpose. He could feel the pact taking hold. It rewrote him cell by cell. Unmaking the man. Weaving the watcher. He saw visions. A girl stumbling into the forest, unaware of what sleeps beneath. A child playing by the black pond, unaware of what stares from its depths. A young woman, Alara, kneeling by the well, whispering an old name, her hands slick with blood. A man in a mask, centuries ago, weeping behind a veil of silence. Himself now becoming that silence. And then it stopped. The visions fell away. The roots loosened. The mask breathed. Marcus gasped, stumbling backward, back into his body, back into the vault. But he was not the same. He stood taller. Straighter. His heartbeat was slow and deep, as if his chest were carved of wood. When he looked down at his hands, he saw a faint network of glowing lines just beneath the skin. Like roots beneath soil. The mask was still on his face. Yet he could see. Not as before, not through eyes, but through the hollow itself. The pillars around the chamber had shifted. Each now showed the same face. His. The new bearer. The watcher. But the silence didn't last. A tremor rolled through the ground. Distant. Subterranean. But real. Then another. And then a voice. Not from within. Not from above. From beyond. He wears the mask. The gate shudders. The hollow stirs. The chamber darkened. The blue lantern flickered violently, then snuffed out. The mask pulsed with red light, brighter now, hot against Marcus's skin. The seventh shrine had not simply bound the hollow. It had imprisoned something. And that something had felt the pact renew. It would not go quietly. The ground groaned. Not the sound of earth cracking or stone shifting. This was older. More alive. It was the moan of something buried deep finally turning in its sleep. Marcus stood at the heart of the vault, masked, transformed, but still unsure where he ended and the hollow began. Every breath he took echoed not just in his lungs but in the roots underfoot. He could feel the land's pulse now, slow, thunderous, patient. But the pulse was quickening. A low cry echoed through the vault. First it sounded like wind. Then like whispers. Then like a scream. From the staircase, shadows poured in like smoke. But this smoke had weight. Intention. The temperature dropped. And she emerged. Alara. But not as before. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, etched with glowing runes. Her eyes were filled with something black and bottomless. Around her floated fragments of bark and bone, circling like moons around a cursed planet. "Marcus," she said, her voice layered as though several beings spoke through her throat at once. "You chose the hollow. You put on the mask." He tried to speak, but the mask had taken his voice. Instead, the hollow itself responded, a whisper that bloomed from the chamber's walls. "He chose balance. You chose power." Elara sneered. "Balance is death in disguise. The forest fed me more. Promised more. I will not be bound again." Her fingers snapped. The walls cracked. Roots burst from the stone, spiraling like serpents. Some black and charred, some glowing sickly red. They lashed toward Marcus, hungry, testing him. He raised his hand and without thinking willed them to stop. They froze in midair. She laughed. "So the mask obeys you. For now. But the roots are deeper than loyalty." She pressed her palm against the stone floor. The entire chamber sank. Walls collapsed outward, revealing a cavern far larger, far more ancient. A cathedral of roots and stone and bone. At its center writhed a thing too vast to comprehend. A titanic shape, humanoid in form but woven entirely of roots, empty eye sockets glaring from a bark-covered face. The first bearer. The origin of the hollow. Marcus knew it without question. It had not died. It had waited. Elara's voice echoed. It was never meant to be sealed. The hollow was never a prison. It was a womb. She turned to Marcus, eyes gleaming. "We are not its watchers. We are its children." Marcus stepped forward, heart thundering beneath the mask. He spoke without voice, through thought alone. "No. We are its guardians. And you have forgotten." From within him the pact surged. All the voices, the bearers before him, roared to life. Not just whispers now. They became roots of will, rising around Marcus, lifting him, forming armor of bark and light. His limbs stretched, his body expanded, no longer merely human. He became what the hollow needed. Not a man. Not a god. But the boundary. He lunged. The chamber became chaos. Red roots battling golden ones, ancient glyphs lighting up the walls, each beam of power carving history into the air. Elara countered, shrieking, her hands casting blasts of rotten flame. She was faster, unpredictable. But Marcus was anchored. With each blow he blocked, with each rune he invoked, the hollow strengthened around him. They clashed beneath the great root titan which began to rise. Its groans split the cavern. Elara turned toward it, not to worship but to merge. Her body began to dissolve, flowing into its chest like liquid shadow. "No." Marcus hurled a pulse of searing light, not from the lantern but from the hollow's memory. The moment of the pact's first binding, etched into reality itself. It struck her mid-transformation. She screamed. The titan froze, caught between waking and breaking. Then Marcus reached forward, placing both hands on the mask sides, and tore it free. The mask shattered. But not into shards. Into roots, thousands of them, which coiled around Elara's essence, binding her mid-scream. She hovered in the air, eyes wide, mouth open in silence, imprisoned not in stone but in memory. The root titan collapsed. The chamber fell still. The only sound was the gentle creak of living wood. Marcus fell to his knees. He was no longer armored. No longer glowing. The pact had burned through him, leaving scars in his soul, but also clarity. He looked around. The cavern pulsed not with danger, but with breath. The hollow slept again. And this time willingly. A book. Years later. The village of Elders Hollow was quieter now. Children no longer played near the black pond. The shrines were sealed but flowers grew at their bases. People remembered the forest, not as a place of fear but of reverence. And in the woods beneath the silvered moon a man walked. He wore no mask. But when he passed, the trees bowed slightly and no creature dared step in his path. He was no longer Marcus. He was the memory, the watcher. And the hollow remained whole.